This year, it is claimed that this will be a bigger exercise than the past year's Balikatan exercise, with the involvement of more troops. And the exercises will involve a myriad of activities, not just focused on developing the war-fighting capability of both armies or both armed forces, but also of the other non-traditional roles such as humanitarian assistance and disaster response, HADR. We are now transitioning from internal security operations focus to territorial defense. There is a common theme among armies around the world. We have this common belief that eventually wars will be fought on land. So, we have to be prepared. And the Philippine Army can assure you that if any invaders would come near the land of the Philippines or inside, inland, your Philippine Army is ready to defend our nation.
Bigger and more extensive war games, Army Chief Lieutenant General Romeo Bronner even sees Balikatan 2023 as the biggest in recent years. What could this year's military exercises between the Philippines and the United States mean to the renewed tension in the West Philippine Sea? We discuss in this episode of the Chiefs. Good evening and welcome to the Friday edition of the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kompleto ulit kami ngayon. Face-to-face, Ed Lingao of One News, Ami Pamintuan, Editor-in-Chief ng Philippine Star, Dulce Cruz Valdez, Head of News 5, at nandito kaming lahat in the great city of Mandaluyong.
Kompleto sa 5Ws.
Ganyan talaga pag biyernes eh.
Matayang spirit.
Maaliwalas yun.
Diba?
EGI. Pero nasasanay na kami ngayon dito, kaming dalawa.
Dapat lang. Kami sanay na
Actually,
sanay
ako'y
na.
madalas dito. Hindi lang nga sa studio ito.
Anyway, yung pag-uusapan natin ngayon, parang buong linggo natin pinag-uusapan. Hindi lang linggo, ilang buwan na.
Dahil sa laser
Pointer lang daw yun.
Pinaigting ng laser na yan
Masyado kayo malisyoso. Pointer lang yun.
Pero ito, bumibili ito ng mga laser sa kung saan-saan. Pero i-clarify mo nga sa...
Ano talagang military?
Ano ang military grade laser?
Ano man, that could be a point of contention eh. Well, to begin with, ang sabi kasi ng Coast Guard natin, 4 nautical miles away nung pinailawan sila ng laser. That's equivalent to mga 7.5 kilometers or from Quezon Circle hanggang UST.
So, kaya napakalakas nun. Napakalakas ng ilaw na yun.
Although nakikita mo parang malapit, pero nag-zoom in kasi yung camera eh. Pag nag-zoom out, kita mo malayo yung barko. So, malakas yung laser.
Hindi, pero pagka sinabi nilang military grade, nakakabulag, ano ba ibig sabihin nun?
Well, meron talagang military grade lasers. In fact, as early as 2014, nag-install na yung US Navy ng lasers on their ships some of their ships. And they can shoot down some small aircraft like drones and
the laser itself. The laser itself.
Yeah, there's been video of that. And pwede naman pasabugan yung armaments ng small boats. Not the boat itself, pero if they target the armaments, they can explode.
So, hindi lang siya pangturo?
Hindi lang siya targeting, hindi lang siya pang-sight or
AMWS number 3.
So, weapons grade. Merong weapons grade talaga. Kasi laser can be used for medicine.
And there's several modes of adjustment dun sa laser na yon. Pwede siyang, it can be used to explode, for example, ammunition on ships.
To bore holes.
I don't know about boring holes kasi mas mahirap yung bakal yan eh. Pero of course, ammunition is more delicate. Pero pwede rin siyang low power to dazzle and to warn away.
Which is being used by law enforcement agencies, mostly Coast Guard.
Yes.
Kasi ang Coast Guard ng China is not It's not civilian.
civilian.
So ito, in this case, do we know?
We don't know yet. We do know it's powerful enough to reach far out and dazzle the Coast Guard
And
crewmen.
that's what they
We
cited
don't
also.
know
That's what they said.
how high power it can go.
So, hindi, ganito na lang ang tanong. Is it possible that what we actually, the crew filmed, what it filmed, was a PowerPoint laser?
Hindi pwede, sobrang laki, sobrang liit mo.
For nautical miles.
Yun ang sinasabi ng China ngayon. Kulang kayo, hindi yan ano.
And also China was arguing na it was only used to
guide the
gauge to guide the ship and to gauge the speed and distance.
Yes.
But that's what you have radar for. You don't really use laser for that, not unless you're a CHPG na nanghuli ng overspeeding sa
Okay.
EDSA.
Yan na nga.
In any case, yan po natutunan namin. Isang buong linggo namin pinag-uusapan to. ang punto lang po is, we're talking about this because obviously this is just the latest incident. It's just one still small incident in the larger picture that we have been painting or trying to make sense of over the past months, even years. And we will be talking about that, and we will be bringing in our guest to talk about war games, which is also now something that brings in something else, another texture, as it were, another element in this big picture. And we'll talk about that after a short break. The Chiefs will be right back.
It is touted as the biggest war games to date. What is the impact of Balikatan 2023 exercises as China grows more aggressive? Let's ask security analyst Chester Cabalza. Welcome back, Chester.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Good evening.
Yeah, it's a powerhouse here.
Hindi, mas powerhouse sa West Philippine
Of
Sea.
course.
China doon eh.
Oh, nice.
So yun nga ang konteksto ng tanong namin sa iyo eh. Ano bang ma-achieve? What do we hope to achieve by this stronger, bigger Balikatan?
Well, it's the return of the Americans. Of course, they were able to get their what they wanted from us. Of course, with the expansion of the EDCA sites. And naturally, China has to react. And of course, one of their recent reaction was the military-grade laser, which is a form of electromagnetic warfare. And we have to consider that this is something that we have to really think about, because the war that we will be seeing, it's going to be unconventional. Although
Ano yung electromagnetic
Okay, ganito ang
warfare?
sinasabi po pag electromagnetic warfare, no? In electronic warfare, of course, no, it's going to be the war of lights. Parang Star Wars, no? May infrared ka. Pero nakita natin, iba-iba yung kulay na ginagamit nila. The one that, the second light or infrared that they were able to use was green.
Yes, the first one
The first one was blue. Yung nakikita natin sa mga bangko, red. Diba? If you try to, kung ikaw ay isang thief and you wanted to get something from the bank, red yung nakikita. Yung red pwedeng putulin yung mga, yung body parts mo.
ganon.
Yung blue, it can get information from you. So once naka-project sa'yo, pwede niya marinig kung ano yung sinasabi dun sa loob ng barko, pwede rin malaman kung sino-sino yung mga tao doon.
So, espionage
It's an espionage weapon. It's part of an experimental weaponry right now, because of course the electronic warfare, it's still in its infancy stage. So tinatry pa nilang gawing sophisticated ito para, of course, they wanted to simulate it during war. This is the thing. During conflicts, kinakailangan i-simulate mo yung technology mo, i-practice mo. So that by the time that war erupts, then you can use it for your own advantage. Nakita rin natin yan in the Russia-Ukraine war. Yung mga Amerikano, pinapadala nila yung bagong technology nila para doon i-simulate, i-exercise. And of course, China is doing this thing also. with us. No, they're trying to simulate some of their technology because of course no, saan nila gagamitin yun, except of course in the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea.
So, green light, ano yun? What does it do?
Yeah, yung green light, of course, no? Parang,
Go away. Go away.
but of course, no, different degrees din yan, no? Kaya niyang, parang starlight, it can direct the nautical movements. But I think, very lethal yung yung blue, because of course, no, of what happened with our PCG personnel, no? It can cause temporary
blue?
blindness.
Yung blue or green?
Green, green, green.
Green.
Temporary light blindness or permanent if overexposure.
Matagal,
Kasi
yes.
these are radiation. So, magfo-fall siya sa CBRNE, yung chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. No, so, and of course, explosives. No?
Chester, meron na bang international recognition that's a weapon? Kasi I'm sure China will deny na weapons grade
as
yung
it
ginamit
has.
nila. Yes, and yun ang nga sinasabi nila. It was just to measure the distance between the two ships, and then to direct utang na loob natin to direct us down to safety.
Alright.
No? So they will dispute that na civilian daw ang gamit nila nung kanilang laser.
Yun nga ang problem, civilian, Coast Guard kasi civilian.
Natin. Their Coast Guard is military.
Of course, definitely. And the purpose of the Coast Guard is to protect the people and the seafarers. Kasi nga, pandagat sila eh. But the point here is, of course, no, merong mga nangyari in Australia. It can be used in naval, aerial, and terrestrial. Yung nangyari yung laser. Yung nangyari sa Australia this year and in 2019, aerial yung ginamit nila, no, yung attack nila. So, yung sinasite na yun ni former Justice Carpio, no, yung armed attack, kasi there's a protocol for that. No, yung using yung weapons. That is in 1980. No, of course, may convention dyan, in Geneva Convention. But of course, no, these things have to upgrade. Yeah, I mean, I'm referring to the laws. Kasi nagbago yung yung unconventional warfare natin ngayon. No, so everything is changing, especially now that you have electronic warfare, which is in its infancy stage right now, and definitely. Kaya pa niyang i-drone later on, no? So, ang dami mo pwedeng makitang pagbabago ngayon dito.
So, wala pa siyang rules.
There's a 1995 protocol, protocol against or prohibiting the use of blinding lasers.
Yeah.
Right.
But even China was a signatory to that. In fact, in 1996, China was even praising the signing of that protocol.
But now, has it been established na yun nga yun? Hindi nga, di ba?
Wala pa, kasi China is also a signatory of UNCLOS. Hindi naman niya fina-follow yung UNCLOS. So, ang daming, China doesn't preach what it teaches. No? Ibig sabihin, hindi niya pinapractice yung mga pinirmahan yung mga kasunduan globally. Of course, these are international conventions. And of course, all the signatory countries, including China, the Philippines, should uphold these international laws.
Okay. Professor, I want to look at the other side also. No? Yung itong Balikatan, of course, malaking bagay tinitingnan. And now they're saying, in fact, di lang malaki, ang pinakamalaki. You mentioned kanina that this signals the return of the United States. Sabi mo nga. But, you know, we've always been allies with the United States. We've always tried to be friendly. We've carried out military exercises with them, notwithstanding even the Duterte administration. But talk about that a bit. Because this is the biggest and all the context that we're coming from, is this in fact a big coming out party for our renewed relations and U.S. access, for that matter, to our shores?
Well, it is the biggest visiting forces Balikatan exercises through the VFA. Because I believe that this is like an opportunity for the Americans, because they were in their stage of denial during the time of President Obama. At that time, they started the pivot to Asia. But at the time, it was just policy making. Just
words.
Lip service.
Yeah. And then, of course, you had Trump, where he introduced the Indo-Pacific strategy. And then all of a sudden, you have, and aside from that, on the part of the Philippines, you have President Duterte also, who pivoted to Beijing at the time. So now we were able to renew our ties with the Americans, and this is the good timing for the Philippines because kung titingnan natin, nung time ni President Aquino, nag-pivot tayo sa Americans, nung time ni President Duterte, nag-pivot tayo sa China. Ngayon, nakita na natin yung dalawang sides. And I think this is the best time for us to mount these Balikatan exercises in a big way. Because of two circumstances. One is, of course, the Taiwan Strait problem, and secondly is the continuous protracted conflict in the West Philippine Sea. So those are the contexts right now.
But Prof, do you expect a further escalation of China's activities, given number one, yung expansion ng EDCA sites, and number two, itong announcement nga that we'll have an even bigger Balikatan. How would China react to this?
I'd like to put ourselves to the shoes of the Taiwanese, no? Since the Republic of Taiwan was established, tinatakot na sila ng China. So embedded na yun sa mindset nila na baka sasakupin tayo, titirahin tayo, gigirahin tayo. Ilang years na yung Taiwan nandyan. So na-immune na sila sa ganun. So what they did is to prepare, to think of the best foreign and security policy that would suit their interest. So ganun dapat yung mindset din natin. Kung ganyan ang ginagawa ng China sa atin, let's think of the best effective foreign and security policy that would help protect our interest.
But then again, Taiwan is different because Taiwan is really at odds with China.
Right.
We have we have diplomatic relations with China, no? So if we take on the stance of Taiwan, it's like we're telling China, kalaban ka.
These are some models or examples. Let's take the example of Vietnam. Vietnam has a centuries-old love-hate relationship with China. But look at them now. They were able to harness their armed forces. It's one of the largest and most furthed armed forces in Southeast Asia. Their economy is getting bigger and, of course, becoming inclusive right now. And they know how to tame China by continuous diplomacy. So, ganun dapat din yung mindset natin. Even with the China threat perception, you still continue with the diplomacy with them. Tama yung ginawa ng ating presidente last time, pinatawag niya yung ambassador ng China to the Philippines and discuss with them. Because diplomacy is the first line of defense. No? And after that, you modernize your armed forces, galingan natin yung ekonomiya. Those are the best ingredients so far.
So, itong biggest Balikatan mo, we're expecting it will be held in the West Philippine Sea, no?
And also in Ilocos.
Yes. Pero yung West Philippine Sea, nandun si Mischief Reef eh.
Right.
We used to hold joint drills there, di ba?
Yes.
When the bases were still here. Ngayon, paano kung napalapit doon yung intentionally pala
nagbago kasi yung security landscape natin, no? Because of course, when you talk about security, meron kang konsepto ng VUCA, yung vulnerable, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. Kaya ang bilis magbago, no? You have the Mischief Reef. 2015, napabayaan
over which
natin.
we have sovereign rights.
Right, that's the point. And then 2012, yung si Scarborough Shoal naman, nangyari yun. And then, of course, ang daming sumunod, yung Whitsun Reef and so on. The point there is that we were not prepared with our strategy because yung strategy natin is internal, military-centric na internal. And we heard from General Browner, no, sinabi niya, we are shifting now to territorial defense. So that is the big word.
Hindi na internal no?
All of a sudden, AFP is talking about territorial defense. Ang tagal-tagal na natin naantay yun.
Oh, okay, but you seem to make it sound like it's actually good news for us. But on the other hand, what risks are we taking by getting into such a stance?
Of course, let's not put into our mind that, of course, let's avoid that the victim narrative. Because we always think that we are the victim here. When, damay-damay na ito. Whether we become neutral or we breach that neutrality, madadamay pa rin tayo. Because we are part of the first island chain.
Inevitable,
because of our geography and because of the precedents in the past. Tingnan nyo, nung sinakop ng Japan yung Pearl Harbor, sumunod yung Manila. Manila is the most bombed city in Asia, the second in the world. Naturally,
Kasi nga nandito yung US nun
that's
eh.
the point po. Ngayon, nandito na naman sila because we recognize their support, because we have aligned interests, common needs, and because of the China threat perception. The point I'm trying to drive at here is that let's accept the reality that we have an important role in the world. Even if we're trying to...
Ando na tayo, but I guess the question is, in the meantime, in the short term, even the President, nabanggit niyo yung Japan, di ba? Ngayon, pinag-uusapan natin, baka pwede na rin tayo mag-VFA with Japan.
Yeah.
And now even President Marcos is saying, oh, sige, pag-uusapan natin yan. Pero not if it's going to raise tensions with China. At this point, hindi ba given yun na parang is there even an if in that scenario?
Yeah, I agree. Wala nang if doon. Dahil ngayon, pumusta na tayo eh. We laid our cards already. At nabasa na ni China kung anong gusto natin. What can we gain from this? And of course, we will discuss later on yung cost. No? First, the concept of interoperability, deterrence, no? And of course, alliance. The point of alliance is to contain someone or any country. Kaya nga nakikipag-alyansa ka kasi alam mong may titira sa'yo. Okay, what are the cost benefits here? Yung cost, definitely, yung economy mo, no? Naturally, bumagsak pag may gera. That's the reason why nobody wants to have war, not even China or the US. Because of course, both of them, the number 1 and number 2 economies of the world, will also go down, will fall, no?
And they can hold hostage our exports like they did in 2013.
That's the point. That's another point. Secondly, of course, no, people will die, naturally. And of course, the destruction, which we saw because, of course, no, we experienced these bombings, wars, and so on. But let's consider also the strength of our military. We have experienced the Marawi siege. That is a good example where we became resilient. China doesn't have war experience. We have. And because of that Balikatan exercises, we can share with our like-minded partners like the US. Kasi kailan ba nakipaggera ang US? Wala. Of course, no, yung failed war nila was in Afghanistan for 20 years. That's the reason why they left Afghanistan. And then in Ukraine, they supported Ukraine by just doling out some of their technology, military hardware, and helping them in their intelligence gathering. So, si Pilipinas, may terrorism experience tayo. May civil war tayo because of the Marawi siege. So, well-trained ang ating military. But of course, the effect is we fear because war brings a lot of damages, no? Psychologically, economically, and there are losses. But at the same time, we can gain, no? The respect that we can gain from the international community, plus yung narratives natin that we fought and we are courageous to, of course, face a big nation. Those are some of the examples that we can get.
But anyway, Prof, wala pa naman tayo dun sa part
Wala pa naman yan, no?
It's a huge spectrum of between war and peace. There's a huge spectrum in between. But I'll go back to my question kanina. Given the VFA, the Balikatan, the expanded EDCA, how should we expect China to? I know you said let's not play the victim card here.
Yeah.
And I understand that. But at the same time, just to be realistic, what should we watch out for? What should we expect when it comes to, for example, the South China Sea, the West Philippine Sea? More laser shows, and how should we react?
Yeah, okay. There are two sides of the coin on how China will play its cards. No, let's look at the more realistic approach. Of course, we will see more yung bullying, yung more laser. Baka sunod
Harassing of fishermen.
no? Susunod, baka may drones na tayo makita, no? Kasi ini-experiment nila yung technology nila. And of course,
Actually, could you expound on that? What could be the next levels? Could you expound on that?
Of course, no. They're using now the electronic warfare, no. A good example would be the military grade laser. Baka maging sophisticated pa yan. And then you can also use actually yung swarming of drones using the laser, no. Pinag-uusapan na namin ng mga senior military students yan sa kampo na pwedeng gawin nila yun, no?
Use the laser to designate a target, and the drones will swarm the target.
Yes, and they can get information also from that, no? And pangatlo, of course, yung economic punishment, reward and punishment naman lang dito when it
Carrot
comes
and
to
stick.
diplomacy, no? Of course, no? Carrot and stick, to. And yun yung mga and of course, yung, we saw that during the time of President Aquino, no? Yung banana, natin, and so on.
Exports,
no? And I think yung kanilang infrastructure projects also, they will try to delay it also. Yung investments nila.
Yes.
Because they are one of the biggest donors when it comes to infrastructures. Okay, those are some of the more realistic. Okay, what would be the soft approach? They will use their soft power. No? Lately, we heard how they were able to convene their alumni in the military and in the academy to have homecoming gatherings and so on. No? Ginagaya nila yung West. This is a form of soft power approach. They will increase their scholarships and people-to-people engagement in their country. They will try to convince some of our politicians, no, policymakers, the academics, kasi may mga think tanks din sila. And possibly, of course, no, they will revert the parang reverse psychology, no. They will pour in more investments to us just to get to win our hearts. So basically, those are two different approaches, no. Pero ang feeling ko baka i-combine nila yung dalawa. Pwedeng ganun yung gagawin nila.
Ang sinasabi nila, yung mga Chinese officials, meron daw diyang yung parang competition between their diplomats and the military. So, hindi lang malaman, under Xi Jinping, mas malakas yata yung boses ng military because he himself is hawkish, no? Anong tingin mo, mas malakas ba yung winning hearts and minds approach, yung soft approach? Or in the face of, remember, they are seeing us not just as the Philippines, mahina to, kundi the Philippines, an ally of the US.
Right.
Kaya ganon kalakas ang reaction nila sa atin eh. They're seeing the US behind us eh. So anong projection mo? Considering what's happening now, mas malakas ba yung soft approach or
I think they are trying to invest now on the soft approach kasi tapos na sila sa wolf warrior diplomats nila di ba? Yun yung dineploy nila to different countries who they think would become a threat or where they wanted to win the hearts and minds of these people. Nandito sila in the stage right now where they're trying to reconfigure their, of course, strategy. Kaya nga, increasing ngayon sa academia yung Confucius Institutes. No, ang daming offers yan, no? Because they felt that why would you destroy a country by going into war? No, the art of war pa rin, no? They are still guided with that kind of philosophy. Kasi naturally, if you really wanted to get a country, yung buo, no, hindi sira. Kasi you will rebuild the country.
Okay, so to this Sun Tzu approach, you think that a bigger Balikatan is a good countervailing measure against
I think
it?
my reading on this is that the Americans wanted to mount a bigger Balikatan because it's symbolic for them. Because they were able to return, they wanted to cement their presence here, and it's also a form of messaging to China that don't ever bully any of my allies.
Ay, nako. Sana nga nagsasalitang anghel ka dyan. Chester Cabalsa, maraming salamat sa iyo. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Salamat, sir.
Salamat po.
Security analyst Chester Cabalsa, thank you for joining us again. And we're starting up another conversation after this breather. Keep it here on One News.
Amid an information war on conflicting versions of history, here's one movie that could spark further discourse. Let's talk to the director of the musical film, Ako si Ninoy, Vince Tanyada. Good evening, attorney.
Ay, good evening.
Welcome
Magandang gabi
to
po.
the Chiefs. Attorney, I remember seeing former President Cory Aquino nag-commission na ito, original
Yes,
musical.
way back in 2009.
In 2009.
Yeah,
So,
oo.
what inspired you to do this now?
Well, yung recent events, no?
Yes.
Most especially last August 21, last year when it trended in Twitter, yung hashtag Ninoy was a traitor. And that prompted me really to adapt the musical play into a film. In fact, I did that in CHIEFS also, which was also my musical film, and I adapted it into a film. At syempre, yung advocacy natin, hindi pa rin natatapos kasi the proliferation of disinformation in the country, most especially in social media. Pagkatapos ngayon sa film nandyan na sila sa film. And nasa visual arts na rin, no? At, kung ano-ano pang sining. Kaya tayo naman, bilang mga alagad ng sining, meron tayong responsibilidad na tigilan o labanan ang pagyurak sa ating kasaysayan.
Well, everyone knows you're doing this now, ano? Gaano karami na trolls mo?
Sobrang dami. Sobrang dami. Meron nga silang pinakawalan na bago ulit dahil para dito nga sa Ako si Ninoy. Pang-araw-araw ko na yan na almusal.
Yeah. But attorney, objectively speaking, di ba? Parang kasi obviously this is not the only film that is sparking that debate, di ba? But in general, labas sa your own works, what do you advise audiences, especially young people, diba? When they legitimately either subscribe wholeheartedly to a film or they come at it with some cynicism, diba? But in general, what's the safe guidance to anybody watching a movie?
Alam mo kasi ang problema sa atin yung poor educational system sa ating bansa eh. Kaya yun nga kapatid o kaibigan ng oppressor, yung pagkamababa at sabi nga ng DepEd, merong limited attention span ng kabataan ngayon, naglalasang ng 15 minutes. Kaya tayo naman
Haba na nga nun eh.
Oo nga eh, magsi-CR na sila. Sa mga palabas namin gano'n eh. Kaya kailangan eh talagang ginagamit natin ngayon yung musika, kasi nga yung K-pop generation. So, ang sa palagay ko yung mga kabataan ngayon, ang kailangan magsaliksik, hindi lang dapat napapako sa social media yung pag-aaral. Tingnan kung yung isa bang sining na papanoorin ay galing sa talagang legitimate na source. Katulad nung amin, meron kami mga historiador, eskolastiko at akademiko na nagtulong-tulong para maisagawa ang pelikulang ito. Hindi lamang opinion,
Pero yung
halimbawa.
pananaliksik, I mean, you would say that applies as well even to your work.
Yes.
Diba? Parang kasi, in fairness, di ba? People say, ay, yung film naman na yan, nag-commission naman yan, si Amy Marcos. But in this case, si Cory naman pala yung nag-commission din ito. Hindi ba parang it goes both ways and for everything?
Robbie, kaya lang, noong 2009, it was commissioned by President Cory, ang Benigno Aquino Foundation. Kaya lang itong film adaptation, syempre, pinalawig na namin ang usapin. Kasi nga masyado ng maraming nangyari. Kaya nagtulong-tulong kami nila Xiao Chua ng Atom, August 21 Movement. Meron din ako dito yung star witness, yung Crying Lady, si Rebecca Quijano, na talagang nag-supply sa amin ng napakahalagang mga impormasyon.
But aren't you essentially preaching to the choir when you come out with a movie like this? Kumbaga, ang manonood lang naman
Luchi.
ito rin yung mga, to use the parlance, no, dilawan.
Hindi. Kasi kailangan natin ng bayani ngayon. Marami pa tayong mga hindi nalalaman tungkol kay Ninoy. At isa pa, ang pelikulang ito, hindi lamang tungkol kay Ninoy. Yun nga yun, yung pinalaki
Martial
namin yung
Otto.
pelikula. Hindi. Tungkol ito sa 11 modern-day Filipino heroes, no, na sumasalamin o na-juxtapose sa buhay ni Ninoy. Kaya ito, sabi nga nila kanina, binabash ako kasi daw may Toyota Hiace Grandia daw doon sa pelikula ko. Wala pa raw nung panahon na yun. Ang hirap lang i-explain na sorpresa yun doon sa pelikula na hindi lang ito tungkol kay Ninoy. Tungkol ito sa modernong 11 bayani na hindi ko pa sasabihin ngayon dahil sorpresa nga sa pelikula.
Okay.
So yung Grandia is not set dun sa panahon ng
ngayon yun. Ngayon yun. Meron
kasi
kaming...
pinapafact check ng iba sa amin.
Ayun,
Yes. Oo, yan. Yan.
Saka ang high age dati, hindi ganyan kalaki.
Oo. Ayan,
Light age
Pampogo na
tayo.
to eh.
School bus namin yun.
Pampogo na tong Grandia na
nag-trend
to.
nga yan eh. Kaya nga sabi ko, kailangan mapanood nila yung pelikula dahil meron kaming OFW. These are real people, by the way, na talagang nag-idolize kay Ninoy at nabago yung buhay dahil sa halimbawa at modelo ni Ninoy. May OFW, may housewife, may teacher, may doktor, may senior citizen, may bata, may estudyante, may artista.
Hindi, pero paano mo nga bubuwagin yung perception nga na kasi title pa lang, ako si Ninoy.
Lucci, word of mouth. Kaya kailangan ko kayo. Kailangan ko ang media, kailangan ko yung mga manonood na pagkatapos ang February 22, let's say manood sila, ang Twitter, ang General Luna, ang Kaya Kita, nung unang araw, walang nanunood. Kaya lang nung napanood nila, like General Luna, nag-trend sa Twitter, everyday, nagte-trend, pati ka-tips, kapatid, yung pelikula ko. Walang nanunood niya nung unang araw namin. Pero yung word of mouth ng mga nakapanood na ito ay kapaki-pakinabang, hindi lang sa mga kabataan, sa ating lahat, ito ay educational, ito ay entertaining, kasi history versus art, di ba? Ang hirap ding pag-usapan nun. Pero, syempre, nilagyan din natin ng entertainment para naman ano pa din, mainstream pa din yung dating ng pelikula.
Pero Tony, you also have two sides of the coin. On one hand, films have a great impact on the viewer, much more than documentaries. People these days, they don't really watch documentaries anymore. They'd rather go watch a film kasi mas madaling panoorin.
Experiential.
On the other hand, you also have people who argue na may creative license ang director. Hindi kailangan na everything is factual, basta lang the theme is there and all that. So on one hand, you have huge impact. On the other hand, may mga tanong dun sa ito ba'y detail for detail mapaglalaban. Hindi. Sabi nga ng isang director, obviously hindi nyo kaibigan, ang sabi ng isang director, this is my
creative license.
So how do we strike that balance na telling people this is something worth watching but this is also something worth believing?
Sabi niya, mas creative daw siya kasi gumamit siya ng mga nandyan na, ng mga ready-made, mga docus, mga videos na nandyan na, ng matagal na. At creative daw siya dahil napagtagni-tagni niya at nasabi niyang may kasalanan si Ninoy. Pero mali yun kasi yung konteksto ng sinabi ni Ninoy, hindi mo siya pwedeng ikat ng ganun-ganun lang at mag-arrive ka na sa isang konklusyon. Dapat mapanood mo yung buong sinabi ni Ninoy. Dito naman po sa amin, syempre nga, meron po kaming mga historiador at mga akademiko na nagtulong-tulong, pero hindi ko rin naman maaalis, ako ay creative din. So dapat mailagay din natin yun. Kaya nga gumamit tayo ng musika, ng sayaw, ng K-pop generation, so to speak, para maging youthful yung atake ng pelikula. At ang pinakamaganda, hindi kami nagsinungaling. Hindi kami tawag dito, yung pumitas ng mga kung ano-anong mga videos diyan at milali-mali namin ang konteksto, ang interpretasyon.
Again, I'll come again from the perspective of a young person. And basically, ang tanong niya, yun din ang sabi ni Daryl Yap, di sila nagsinungaling.
You named him.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
Diba? But ang point ko lang is,
Hindi
if I was a student, opo, pero paano ko nga malalaman, di ba? Kasi lahat ng panig, sinasabi, nagsaliksik kami. Di ba?
Exactly.
So, ano yung payo natin sa, like I said, objectively speaking, ano yung payo natin sa kabataan na, sige, hindi kayo, I think this is safe to say, hindi ka kailangan maniwala sa akin, hindi ka kailangan maniwala sa kabila. Pero paano nila malalaman kung anong paniniwalaan nila?
Alam mo, Robbie, sa kanilang lahat, wala naman silang sinabi na meron silang historians na tumutulong, mga resource people. No? Ito ay tungkol kay Ninoy. Kaya napakaganda na galing kay President Cory mismo yung karanasan. Hindi karanasan ng iba tungkol kay Ninoy. Pagkat yung kanilang pelikula ay tungkol kay Ninoy din eh. No? Kaya ang pinakamahalaga para sa mga kabataan, maging vigilant, maging mapagmatyag. Kasi ayoko naman pangunahan mga kabataan kung paano nila malalaman. Siyempre, kailangan mabigyan din natin sila ng kalayaan na alamin kung anong dapat panoorin. At tayo, maging responsable, tayo mas nakatatanda, na gamitin ng social media, ang promotion, katulad nito, tayo mga komentarista, alamin at tayong mga sinasabi nating tinitingala ng mga kabataan, tayo siguro mamuno at magpamala sa kanila ng dapat nilang kailangan ko kayo.
Ito, dalhin ko naman sa ibang level naman because nabanggit mo nga yung social media. Kayo filmmaker, kami media. Kami ramdam namin yung parang nag-TikTok na lang sila, parang may nakikinig ba sa atin, may nanonood ba sa atin, may naniniwala ba sa atin. In the film industry, do you feel your influence waning or obviously you're here, you're making films, or do you still have this complete confidence that the film industry can push back against the power of social media?
Ang hirap na ngayon, sa katotohanan, yung mga pelikula talagang sumasadsad na sa box office. Kaya lang, meron akong device na makabago na I go to the campuses. Nagpo-promote ako ng pelikula ko, sinasabi ko yung educational viability ng pelikula. At sa kabutihan palad, maraming mga educational institutions na naniniwala doon sa objetibo at layunin ng mga ginagawa ko.
So, kunyari, ka-tips, how did that do in the box office?
Ay, yung mga tawag dito, block screening ng mga paaralan.
So, talagang gano'n na lang.
Dinala namin ito
Hindi-
sa mga colleges and universities.
Yeah.
So, yung nakasanayan natin na nagwo-walk-in yung mga
Sa movie house. Siya na itatanong
hindi na siya ganun ngayon. Kasi mahirapan ka talaga. Although may magwo-walk-in, pero pagkatapos nung run mo, kailangan mag-marketing ka.
What
So-
about streaming? Kasi kaya namatay din yung movie industry eh. Streaming libre,
nga.
nandun ka lang sa bahay mo. And
Oo.
yung movie house, 200 to 400 pesos.
Madali naman yung streaming, kaya lang ngayon pinapakinabangan ko pa yung katip sa mga campus tours, no? So after
windowing yan, siguro after this
Siguro
window
after
dun sa-
the ito namang Netflix, kung bumili ng pelikula 200,000 na lang. So parang
ganun ba?
ganun na, oo.
Ang binabarat.
Pesos or
Barat na
dollars?
pesos, Ed. Kaya hindi mo na, yung inaakala natin na malaki yung kikitain, hindi. Wala na. Kaya talagang dapat pakinabangan mo na muna yung pelikula mo
nga. Yeah.
bago mo ilagay sa Netflix.
Ganun
Yung
ka.
YouTube, pwede kang kumita siguro, kaya lang hindi naman papasa yung katips doon dahil R16 kami.
Oo nga, tama.
So itong ako si Ninoy, baka pwede pagkatapos ng run, mailagay ko sa YouTube. Baka kumita ako doon. Kasi
Walang violence nun.
wala. Kasi PG kami, by the way. Kaya pwedeng lahat manood.
Oo. Ay, gano'n na nga lang, no? Windowing.
Oo.
Pero, okay, technically, anong challenges ng Kasi musical, tsaka stage usually yung pinanggagalingan mo, no?
Hindi kasi formula yung musical sa bansa
yun
natin.
nga eh.
So,
Parang,
ang nakasanayan natin rom-com. So, pag musical, akala natin hindi bebenta. Kaya lang,
Maganda yung music, kung parang Blackpink.
yun, oo.
Teka lang, iba to eh. Hanyo yun eh.
Hindi, teka, bakit yung Les Miserables? Bakit yung yun, ginanon ko yung ako si Nero. May ganon akong part na parang K-pop. Yung Les Miserables, di ba? Full musical. Pero nung nagpalabas ito sa atin, nag-blockbuster siya. So, yung La La Land, nag-blockbuster dito. Kasi ang problema sa mga filmmakers ngayon, masyadong kailangang dun sa formula sumabay. Pero ako, bilang producer at filmmaker, ayoko namang sumabay na lang ng sumabay sa formula. So, yung ginawa kong katips ng musical, well, bumenta naman siya. Kasi bakit ako gagawa ng pelikula kung nalugi naman? Pinapakalat nila, flop daw yon, wala, nilangaw, ganun-ganun. Pero okay lang yun sa akin kasi alam ko naman yung totoo.
Hindi, tsaka ang daming nominasyon. Diba?
At nanalo.
At nanalo pa.
Sa FAMAS,
Exactly.
oo.
Oo.
Pero sinabi nila, ako lang daw nagbigay ng award na yun sa sarili ko. So, mahirap eh. Parang mahirap makipaglaban sa mga trolls ngayon. Kaya hindi na ako nagbabasa ng SOCMED ko.
So parang, do you think that this also serves to advance already divided state? Parang it doesn't advance
How do you
unity.
avoid, I guess, how do you avoid just being caught up in yung palitan na lang ng sige, version mo yan. Ito version namin. Di ba? And then, ito version namin. Ito bagong sine ko.
Tapos magsasabayan na lang.
Tapos magsasabayan na lang, di ba? Palakasan na lang ng boses. And at the end of the day, sabong.
Magkukumparahan ka
Di ba? So how do we also avoid feeding into that na parang we're not, to Luci's point earlier, we're not actually, are we trying to convince each other or are we just saying, sige, naglalabas din ako.
Sa katotohanan, yung produkto mismo, yung pelikula namin, wala kaming kinakalaban. Ito ay pagpapakita that there is a hero in all of us. So talagang kapag ka napanood mo yon, wala kaming Marcos, wala kaming Imelda dun sa aming pelikula. Wala kaming, ito'y karanasan ni Ninoy bilang isang tao, bilang isang pamilyadong tao, no? Makadiyos sa tao. No, yung transformation ni Ninoy na nung siya'y napiit
Bonifacio.
at sa Fort Magsaysay most especially, ito ay pagpapakita ng pagkatao mismo ni Ninoy at kung paano ito sumalamin sa 11 individual sa modernong panahon. So pagkatapos mo mapanood dito, hindi ka naman magagalit sa kabila. Sa palagay ko nga, mas mamahalin mo ang bayan. Katulad ng pagpapalabas ito ng Dula noong 2009, ganun din ang naranasan ng tao. Wala naman din itong kinakalaban. Sila, kung may kinakalaban sila, sa kanila na yon. Pero kami, ako bilang, ganun din yung ka-tips. Kung napanood yung ka-tips, wala kaming kinalaban. Iyon ay mga karanasan ng mga simpleng individual na valid doon naman. Dahil yun ay karanasan nila nung panahon ng martial law. Pero wala rin ako Marcos doon. Wala rin ako Imelda doon.
How much faith do you still put in the audience at this point? Na parang, kumbaga, sige, maglabas tayong lahat. And the free market of ideas will win out. Di ba? Parang magsusuri yung mga tao, pwede nilang panuurin lahat, pwede silang mamili kung anong papanuurin nila. At then, at the end of the day, maniniwala sila sa kung anong gusto nila at kung ano yung papaniwalaan nila, more or less yun yung tama. How confident are you still in the Filipino audience?
Alam mo, I've been directing, Robbie, for 30 years ng theater play. And I have transcended from being an artist to becoming an educator. Mas mahalaga sa akin ngayon, I still believe and I have faith in the Filipino audience. Mahal ko pa rin ang bayan. Dito pa rin ako gagawa, lilikha ng sining. At mas malakas pa rin yung pananampalataya ko na isang araw, darating, na may eduka sila, matututunan nila ang lahat tungkol sa ating kasaysayan, matitigil ang pagyurak kahit na ito'y suntok sa buwan, pagyurak sa katotohanan, at magbabalik tayo sa tama at sa katotohanan. Ako kasi bilang alagad ng sining, parang jaded na ako . Parang nagsawa na akong, lagi akong nagpe-play about, hindi itong unang pagkakataon, hindi ko to ginagawa para labanan si Daryl Yap. I am using my hard-earned money, lawyering for the past 20 years. I'm not a big production. I'm not even a senator of the Republic. Wala akong panlabas.
Nabanggit mo yan. How do you avoid the perception na hindi to propaganda in preparation for 2025 or
Kanino?
future
Para kanino?
elections? I don't know, because now, politically,
ako-
they're saying nga that, naku, wala na yung mga LP, parang nawala yung opposition. No? So,
Kasi Lucci, since 2001, I've been doing this. Lahat ng plays ko, theater plays ko, hindi base. I'm not importing anything from Broadway or from West End. I am creating my own based on
Original.
our history, based on our culture, and our national identity. So noon pa, nagtatama na ako ng kasaysayan. Kaya hanggang ngayon, nandun pa rin ako sa advokasya na yon.
Pero Tony, not talking about the future or our hopes for the future na eventually things will pan out, but particularly right now, especially after the elections and the amount of support that the Marcos family got in the elections, do you ever get to the point that you feel like you're jousting against windmills?
Most of the time. And masakit, sa totoo lang. Pero pagka wala nang natira, malulunod tayong lahat sa kasinungalingan. Ako na nga lang mag-isaw. Maganda na may nag-produce for Joel Lamangan. Pero hindi naman namuhunan si Joel Lamangan. May nag-produce para sa kanya. Ako, nag-produce ako para sa sarili ko at lumika ako ng sining na magpapakita sa lahat ng katotohanan. Kaya ang lahat ng naniniwala sa katotohanan, ang lahat ng naniniwala na hindi dapat yurakan ng kasaysayan, kahit konti na lang tayo, tulungan niyo ako.
Sige. Vince, we're almost out of time, but before we lose time, sabihan mo naman kami, paano mapapanood ng mga tao itong Ako si Ninoy?
Plugging time. Go.
Ganun ba?
Oo.
Okay, showbiz na. Mga kababayan, sa February 22 na po ang showing ng Ako si Ninoy sa lahat po ng cinemas nationwide. Ayan, ano po ito, starring Juan Carlos, yung umawit ng buwan, sikat na sikat sa buong mundo yung awitin niya. At yung buwan ay kasama sa musical film namin. At kasama rin dito si Sarah Holmes bilang Cory Aquino, si Marlo Mortel, si Cassie Legaspi, si Joaquim Domogoso, si John Ray Rivas, yung nanalo ng Best Supporting Actor sa CHIEFS. Kasama rin si Jim Paredes, Pinky Amador, si Lovely Rivero, si Tuesday Vargas, si Donita Knows, at pagbabalik ni Miss Asinit Briones. Ayan.
Okay. Vince Tanyada. Maraming salamat.
Salamat mga kapatid. Salamat po.
Salamat sa Si Vince po, ang direktor ng musical film na Ako si Ninoy. And that is all we have for the Chiefs this week. We hope it was discussed. We'll keep the conversation going. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.